Good evening and welcome to ESP TV. My name is Karen Bryson, and tonight's topic is a continuation of domestic violence and sexual abuse. Our esteemed guests and panelists are, we have with us from Samaritan House, Dani Miller Holmes, Mary Tyler, and we regret that Shirley Gore is unable to be with us as her husband has pneumonia. So we're sending out really heartfelt wishes and a speedy recovery for her husband. We also have with us April Marcell, who is a producer, director, and teacher. Let me tell you a little bit about Ms. Marcell. Ms. Marcell is the CEO of Gibson and White Pictures and also has a BA degree in theater arts. April has had several plays produced, one of which includes a musical, God's Eye, which was produced at Downing Cultural Arts Center and at the New Millennium Studios. Her film, No Weapon Shall Prosper, was picked up by Maverick Entertainment Group and is distributed worldwide. April's comedic short play, Out of Gas, was also produced at Mill Mountain Theater and has been distributed as a horror feature film. April was also the theater director at Booker T. Washington High School here in Norfolk, Virginia, and enjoys helping students aspire towards their dreams. She was formerly an editor at News Channel 3 in Norfolk for the past 5 years and has since returned to Norfolk Public Schools doing what she loves best, which is teaching. How are you, April?
I am great.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for asking me to be here.
We also have with us Dani Miller Holmes. Dani is the outreach educator specialist for Samaritan House. She has over 6 years of experience in the field of homelessness, specifically working with those that become homeless due to violence. She has experience in outreach and education as a community educator, as well as working directly with victims and survivors of violence as a resident advocate for domestic violence agency in Texas. Prior to Dani's current position, she worked as a housing stabilization case manager for Samaritan House, working with survivors as they move forward on a path to becoming financially secure and independent. In her position as the outreach education specialist, she gives presentations and helps facilitate conversations about domestic violence in the Hampton Roads area. Along with other Samaritan House staff, Dani works closely with underserved populations to increase their access to services and to increase our understanding of their needs. Dani, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And lastly, let me introduce you to Mary Taylor. Mary is the Crisis Service Supervisor for Samaritan House, overseeing the daily operations of the Crisis Intervention Hotline, emergency shelters, intake coordinators, and victim advocates. Prior to this position, Mary worked directly within the Virginia Beach Police Department as head victim advocate with Samaritan House, which was definitely a smart and lateral move for them. She has 10 years of experience in case management and trauma services. She has traveled to Puerto Rico as well as internationally on a number of occasions to work as part of a volunteer team providing direct services related to domestic violence and trauma recovery. Mary is committed to building and maintaining an effective network of compassionate, interconnected agencies who work effectively together with the safety and healing of individual survivors as a primary goal. Mary, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me.
Each of you ladies are so diverse and effective in your various areas, but our listeners really need to know specifically these various questions that I'm about to ask you. First of all, are victims of domestic and or sexual abuse and violence susceptible to those same horrors once displaced and living on the street. Mary, can you start off with us, giving us an example or some answers towards this?
So I think once someone has been a victim of either types of violence, they're in general much more likely to experience those types of violence again. Sometimes our reactions to trauma that are very healthy responses designed to self-protect continue much longer ways and lead us to make decisions that leave us open to victimization again.
Absolutely. Dani, can you add anything to this?
Yes, I will say, for those who may be experiencing homelessness already, could be more susceptible to experiencing violence because they are already vulnerable by not having a place to live and just are exposed to just more violence because of that. And so I would say that those experiencing homelessness would be more susceptible to experiencing violence for sure.
All right. April, as a producer director and one of your videos, what led you to lead yourself into that direction to make that particular video? What was the name of it?
No weapon shall prosper.
No weapon shall prosper. We will see that portion of it in a moment, but what gave you the initiative to want to make a film in that direction?
My own personal experience with domestic violence and just seeing it, people that I knew lived that, and I wanted to be a voice. And one of the things that I wanted to do is for a career was do film. So I used that platform to be a voice, an advocate for domestic violence. So just my own personal experience.
With your personal experience, were you ever directed to go to a Samaritan house, or were you strong enough to remove yourself from that situation yourself?
Well, I think what made it hard for me was I grew up in a church, and I was taught that a sanctified wife sanctifies the husband, and we were taught to stick with it, stick with your husband, don't leave your husband. It was just something that wasn't looked upon, to leave. So I just thought that I was being a strong person, a strong wife, a faithful wife by just staying in the situation. And even though I had a large family, I had a large church family, but I felt like I was all by myself because I felt like I had to stay in that situation. But I learned that that's something that God didn't approve of. You can't stay in a situation and change a person, just by trying to be good and do all the dot the I's and cross the T's. Right. You just cannot change a person. I think when your life is in danger, you should leave. And if you want to be with your husband, then you pray and ask God to fix it, because you can't. You need to get out and allow God to do that. And until He does, don't go back.
Okay. Dani, is there a disparity in access to services and financial support to women of color? Have you found that to be an issue, or is it across the board anyone that basically needs services for domestic or sexual abuse available to all resources?
Yeah, so something that is one of the things that we are working on is increasing access to services, especially for women of color. We know from national research, from information even statewide and locally, that women of color do experience higher rates of violence, and that is due to even some of the reasons that April just mentioned, and obviously some other complex reasons. And because of that, we want to recognize that as an organization. And so one of the things that we are doing is we have committees that do represent our underserved populations. And one of those committees is African American survivors. And those who are made up of in the committee are Samaritan House staff and community partners who identify as being part of that community. And one of their goals is to look at Samaritan House and evaluate Samaritan House's policies and forms, services, and training to make sure that Samaritan House and the community is doing what they can to increase access to services. And so because of what we have learned nationwide, in our state and locally, and even at our organization, we know that women of color are experiencing high rates of violence, and we want to be a part of creating that change, whatever that can be. And so that is actively one of our goals. And so if anybody who's listening, or even y'all, if y'all want a way to connect, our committee is one of the ways to do that, because we really want to know from the community what they are thinking and feeling. So.
Excellent. Listeners, I hope that you're taking notes on this. Mary, through the hotline and other avenues that you work through at Samaritan House, have you found it that more people of color aren't calling in because of embarrassment, or maybe they just don't feel that they're going to be heard, or is it a lack of knowledge? What is your perspective on this?
So I would say, in terms of numbers of people calling in from the hotline, we don't see fewer numbers of women of color calling in than anyone else. What we do see is sometimes an increased severity of violence, and a waiting until the violence has reached a certain level before they will call in. So I think I've forgotten the second part of your question. But the numbers are actually relatively equal. So we don't see fewer women of color calling in. They do have some different experiences and some different expectations of what services they're going to receive. And some of that comes from having different experiences than other women as they go through the process, and having different cultures and different types of advice that they've been given. So like April mentioned about the church and a family that will come in and give very well-meaning advice that is not necessarily going to protect the client in and of itself. And so sometimes they come in a little bit more resistant to receiving help and services. With any victim of domestic violence or survivor of domestic violence, really the key is just allowing the person to be heard. And one of the things that we try to focus on here at Samaritan House is making sure, no matter who's calling in, that we're really listening to what their story is and listening for the direction they want to move in. We really want to empower all of our clients to move in the directions they want to move, not necessarily what we think is best for them. So educating the client on what their options are and allowing them to determine all of their own directions and choices is just something that's super important to everything that we're about. And I think once those client really begins to understand that all of our services are about empowering them and not moving them in the direction that we want them to go, some of those barriers begin to come down.
Absolutely. I need to ask either Dani or Mary, either one of you can answer this. Once a woman and or her children are within the Samaritan House, safe house, what are their options? Because one, if they work, then the spouse or their significant other knows where they work and where to find them. And if they have children, number two, they know where the children go to school. Mm-hmm. So what are their options at that point?
So, yeah, I sure can. So there's a whole host of options, from coming in with receiving a protective order that would effectively bar that person from coming to the client's house in the schools. If the child has been exposed, not necessarily harmed themselves, but exposed to that violence. So if they were present when the incident happened, the courts will often put the children on the protective order until the safety of the children can be established. Then moving forward from here, the client really gets to make their own decisions. So they're connected with a housing locator that begins to help them work on relocating into a new home, which we are able to help them keep confidential. We have a job readiness specialist who, if they're unsafe in their current employment, or if they're not making enough to make those ends meet when they're living on their own, she'll help them build up their resume and find ways to find new employment that's going to meet that need. And then they're also connected with an emergency housing case manager who helps them put together all the documents that they need, whether they've been able to bring them or not, from birth certificates to medical records, etc. And a victim advocate will walk them through that legal process, whether it's connecting them with a detective, bringing them to the magistrate's office to press charges, if that's what they desire to do. Some people come in and really they just want to be free, but they don't want to walk through that legal process, and that's absolutely okay. Again, those choices are all up to that client. Once they're rehoused, they may be in a new school district, so their children actually would be in a different school zone. That is something that happens very, very frequently. They are also connected at that point. Once they're in their new house, they're connected with a housing stabilization case manager who stays with that client for an entire year after they're moved into a new home, to help make sure they're getting on their feet, to make sure that throughout that first year, all the things that come up in a new life, they have someone there to support them.
That is extremely helpful, because I know that is beneficial to anyone going through a traumatic experience. April, when you decided to leave your husband for your own well-being and mental health, was it just you, or were children involved?
I definitely had children.
Okay.
I had 6 girls and 1 boy. And
Ooh.
I think the turning point for me, and I'm so happy about these organizations, because whether they know it or not, well, I'm sure they know it, but they do help. And I was pregnant with one of my children during this situation, and I actually went, I think it was the health department, I don't remember what it was, but that one of the organizations, they were a part of it. And I was there, I went to the office, and she noticed a scar that I had gotten the night before. And you know, I was good at covering it up and everything, but she saw it and she said, "Did somebody do that to you?" And I was kind of shocked, because you know, everybody else just overlooked everything. You know, it was like they turned a blind eye. Yes. But she looked at me directly in my face and she said, "Did somebody do that to you?" And I just started crying. And she said, "You don't have to go back to that. We can help you." And I think that was the turning point for me, because it was some kind of light at the end of the tunnel. It was a way of escape. And I said, I can do this. And I just think from there, things just began to change for me. So.
Okay. Dani and Mary, when someone finally comes to your doorstep, do they feel like a weight has been lifted off of their shoulders, and that you are the beacon of life and the help, so that they can finally, to put it no other way, to just exhale and feel that they're safe?
You know, I will say there is something to being in a different physical location that I've seen before when I used to do intakes, and they would come to the location where we would do those. And I would just see just a little bit of relax, like, oh, I'm somewhere safe. I can see that there's, not everybody's going to know that I'm here, because that's one of the things that we always stress is confidentiality. We don't go and tell anybody, tell their business at all. But what I hope that they see is that they are their own beacon of light, that when they do get to that point, if it's like coming to our office to do an intake, or once they go into the shelter, or once they move into an apartment in their housing program, that they're like, I'm doing it. I'm making these decisions for myself and for my family. So my hope in all of it is that they are just, whoever our participants are just seeing their own strength and their own light, and continuing to grow that as they make it through whatever programs they're a part of, or however long that they're with us. That's always my hope, is that we're creating that environment of empowerment, where they're really the ones creating all that change and growth, and we're just there to walk alongside them and provide support.
Absolutely. Has there ever been a case, or the case, where the abuser has maybe threatened other family members and stalked the family members to find out information, to find out where the person was that they're searching for?
Yes, I have seen that happen. Mary might know this a little bit more than me, but I have had that happen. And so that is one of the things that we do talk about with our clients, is safety planning for them, but also safety planning with their family members and close friends that their abuser might know. And so that they're aware of what appropriate steps need to be taken, especially if somebody is stalking them, how to document that the best that they can.
One of the things that we've seen happen when we've had multiple family members affected or in danger, even if it's not directly the spouse or partner, that family member sometimes is in just as much danger. So even those family members are able to come to Samaritan House and to receive services to whatever degree they desire and to whatever degree is necessary. In general, what ends up happening if we have more than one person from a family, they'll be connected with separate case managers and separate victim advocates. So my colleagues and I, working as a victim advocate, would oftentimes be working on the same case, but we would be connected with different members of the family. And the reason for that is that one family member's experience, the things they want to share and divulge, and the things they want to, the decisions they want to make, they might not necessarily feel free to express in front of that other family member for fear of making them angry, or they have a different opinion about things, or they want to go in a different direction, particularly when it comes to legal matters. So having those separate advocates allows each person to be helped and to walk as an individual, even within that same circumstance.
I cannot even begin to imagine how traumatic and disruptive that is for households, because not one or two lives are affected, but everyone involved. Ladies, Samaritan House, are you able to share advantages or other programs with different states or different agencies that may be implemented within your own organization, or is each state basically a unit unto itself?
Each city, even in the area, is really a unit unto itself. Every agency does things a little bit differently. We are able to advocate within systems in other states, in other courts, in other shelters, but those individual shelters and courts are still going to do things according to whatever their policies are, and we don't have any control over that.
Okay. Is there a time frame that a woman or family is only able to be a part of the Samaritan House? Or you did mention at one time that the intake I'm sorry, the agent will stay with them for about a year to make sure that they're settled. Is that basically the time frame, or has it lasted longer?
So,
So
I think there's a couple of
you got it. You got it.
there's a couple of different things, and Dani, I'm going to let you talk about the housing process because you're a little bit, that's more on the front end. Victim advocacy has gone for, I think the longest case I've had is come up to 2 years. Those things in court last much longer. So many clients will stay connected with a victim advocate long after they have completed all the programs that they're involved with through Samaritan House, just as a process of walking through that system. We're just not going to leave them to walk any part of it by themselves. The actual process of moving into a new home and getting connected with a case manager, I'm going to let Dani talk about a little bit.
Yes. So what typically happens is if somebody became homeless due to violence, they will go into an emergency shelter, and we have different locations, confidential locations that they could go to. And the average length of stay for those, I believe, is about 30 to 45 days because it's supposed to be a temporary place where they're working on a plan to maybe relocate, move in with family, or to possibly go into the housing program, which is what I was a part of. And depending on their situation, they will be in our program for about 6 months to a year. Well, they will receive a housing subsidy where we will assist in rent because we know that building financial security, leaving a very traumatic situation, experiencing trauma, it's not a quick fix to become stable after that. And so we do range in our case management depending on what they have going on. And we do also have a human trafficking program where their rates of stay are different because of kind of what Mary mentioned. The legal process tends to be pretty lengthy in those situations, so their length of stay differs a bit because of that.
Excellent. Viewers, I hope you really are taking notes because this is some wonderful advice and information that needs to be shared. You may not need it, but someone else you know may need this information. I'm going to ask our technical department, will they show us the trailer for No Weapon Shall Prosper by April Marcell?
You cannot allow hate to consume you. That's what I did. When I was standing there about to blow his head off, I was allowing hate to consume me.
I will kill this dude. I will kill him. You know what we need to do? Pack your bags and get out of Dodge.
Everybody knows, okay? Everybody knows that your husband beat you. I don't even know why you stay with him. Just leave.
You know what time it is. And welcome to Hampton Roads Poetic Lounge. You know, we got something special planned for you today. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the sounds of Jacoby.
I know you don't know me and all, but God knows all about it. He has the answer.
That them? Yeah, that's them. I need y'all to put in some work for me. I need y'all to take this dude out for me. What about her? Leave her to me.
So, you telling me you didn't feel that connection?
Let me go.
is a movie, but all too often that is definitely how real life is played out. Dani or Mary, have you found that women, once they've gone through the program, and even with all of the seminars, maybe the coaching, the life experiences and everything, the financial support, whatever else that you have given them to help them get on their feet, have you ever found that someone has actually gone back to a same type of relationship and you've had to start from scratch again? Either one of you?
I was in 2 separate positions at the agency in Texas, and I worked with a woman as a resident advocate, and then in a different position, I went back into the shelter, and I saw her again, and she saw me and recognized me immediately, and I said, "Oh, hi, I haven't seen you since the last time you were here," and she just looked down and just said, "Yeah, I know, I'm here again," and it was because of someone else, actually. And so, I mean, a statistic that hasn't changed in a really long time is that even if it's different relationships, but that it takes 7 times, usually on average, before someone leaves an abusive relationship permanently. And that's not the same for everybody or anything, but that is a statistic that is still pretty strong, just because it is a complex situation. It's a relationship, they love that person, all sorts of different reasons in which it makes it difficult to leave and to want to stay, but it is something that we do see.
My goodness. You ladies mentioned earlier that once a restraining order or other documentation is in place, that should alleviate the problem, but we all know that a piece of paper is not going to stop someone if they really want to hurt you or find you. Do you, or should I say, does Samaritan House help with any legal matters as far as helping to find attorneys, and who would subsidize the bills for those?
So the victim advocates walk alongside clients in a variety of different ways, from accompanying to interviews with law enforcement, to when something in that kind of a case where it's just not stopping, there are lots of avenues between taking out charges with the magistrate or talking to perhaps a detective for filing something a little bit more weighty. And then in terms of court with protective orders and custody, in civil cases, we're able to connect clients with a variety of different attorneys, either legal aid if the client doesn't have the income to pay for an attorney, or we have a list of attorneys who we have each observed working with our clients who've had very positive experiences and have agreed to speak with our clients and assess on a needs basis, either pro bono, meaning without cost, or at a reduced rate in order to walk them through that process. For criminal charges, the Commonwealth attorney is the one who prosecutes that case, so no attorney is necessary. That the client then becomes a witness in the case, but it is the Commonwealth attorney who is actually pressing the charges. And the victim advocate will walk through with the client through the entire process, whether it's civil or criminal, right from the beginning to accompanying them whichever direction they want to go.
That is really awesome and great to know. April, when you were going through your experience, did you have to elicit private counsel, or were your family and friends able to help you and get you through this?
Well, in my situation, I basically went through it on my own, because like I said, I was in the church, and just the whole marriage thing kind of put me in a situation like that to deal with it on my own. But like I said, when I went to talk to the lady at the organization, I started doing things like calling the police and things like that. And I was still in it, and I found myself one night waking up to my husband standing over me with a butcher knife. And it was like, okay, I had all my kids here, how am I going to get out? But my faith was really strong, and I knew God was with me. And, you know, that may not work for everybody, but God was in control of my life. And like I said, I had a strong faith, and it was Him that brought me out. But again, these organizations are in place to help you. They're in place to help you. And for any woman that's going through something like this, you can go to these places and they can help you. Okay, you're not in it by yourself, like I felt like I was. You know, I could have went to places that could have helped me, but, you know, by the grace of God, I didn't lose my life. You know, and I'm still here today to talk about it. So.
Excellent. I'd like all three of your responses on this next question, please. As the abused person, do you feel like it was your fault?
I don't now. But back then, I felt like maybe I was cursed or something because of something I did. Because, you know, I loved everyone. I gave love to just about everyone. Like, I was told I was one of the nicest people that there was, but yet I was still suffering this abuse. So, but now I know better. You know, I'm not responsible for that.
Absolutely. Dani, in your capacity, have you found that to be one of the facts, that they feel that it was their fault and they initiated that, all the abuse that was heaped on them?
I have definitely heard that from clients. And, you know, sometimes that is part of the abuse by the abuser, is to put that blame on them, like, this is happening because of you, which is not the case. And so that's something that we have to talk through sometimes, is that we hear so many justifications for abuse, so many different reasons that people, especially abusers, try to make it okay that it's happening. And so that is a conversation that we kind of have to go through repeatedly, is kind of having this outside perspective, outside person saying it is not your fault. And that is something that I try to remind them as we're working through the process. No matter what a person does, it doesn't mean that they deserve to be hurt and to be abused by someone that they love. No one deserves that.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Mary, what has been your experience?
Very much the same. Even in cases where the person really knows what their abuser is doing is not okay, very often there's still this sense of, well, but I didn't respond to it well, or I understand why he or she has become that way because of family or whatever, and so I feel responsible for making them better. And so one of the things, two of the most important things that I try to convey to clients is there's nothing you could ever do or say or yell or throw. There's nothing you could ever do to make it okay for someone to put their hands on you. Not ever. It's never okay. And the other thing is that clients very quickly realize that even through this process, many of the things they're going to experience are going to send that message back to them, particularly in the court process. Things don't always work out the way we might like to see. And so one of the things we try to convey to clients is really, this is no longer about him. This is about you. This is about you being free and valuable and worth and able to move forward with your own life in the ways that you choose that are safe and healthy. And that whatever happens with him, whether he's convicted or not convicted, whether the court or any other systems or church or family ever validates the experience that you have walked through or not, does not change what the truth is, and it does not change your value. And so really, once clients are able to grasp that, wow, I have value. I can expect not to be treated this way, is when they really begin to let go of that sense of blame, of self-blame, and really walk into freedom.
Absolutely. Ladies, this is an interesting other end of the spectrum for this. Has a child singularly ever come to Samaritan House seeking assistance from being sexually abused or from domestic violence within the household? And is there a certain age group that you deal with?
Mm-hmm. So we do periodically have children who come. Generally, it's the parent who's bringing the child to us. We do work with children who are the children of our clients. We have a children's case manager who works specifically with the children of our clients, but in general, the client is always the parent. So even in cases where a child is the victim, the mother still comes to us as the primary client, and we're happy to walk them through the services that they need to connect with to make sure that their child is safe and to be connected with. But the adult parent is the primary client.
Absolutely. With some of the retreats that you have hosted, Mary,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the things that are imparted to the women so that they are empowered and feel stronger and feel that after 3 days they can go back into their lives with renewed vigor and know that they can handle things from there?
I think those retreats might be from somewhere else. That's not something that we generally do. So I think I'm not sure what you're asking.
You're absolutely correct. I'm so sorry. Our wonderful
That's okay.
guest, Miss Gore, was supposed to be here, and that was part of what she does. I had that on my mind. Please forgive me.
That's okay.
What advice normally would either of you give to someone that is seeking help for domestic violence? If they didn't want to come and be out of the household but just ask for advice, what advice would you give them? Mary?
I think just initially, I would just say that there's always somebody they could reach out to, even if calling might be too much. There, you can even text the hotline here in Virginia, actually, and so even just to find out more information, because we completely understand that taking that first step can be really difficult, and it also can be very dangerous. And so that there are professionals out there who will walk with them whenever they're ready to safely leave a dangerous situation.
Absolutely. Do you feel that they should talk to their friends and someone else to get advice, or is that going to be a hindrance and even make the situation more dangerous?
I think that that depends on the friends. And really it's up to that client. And ultimately, I would say whatever supports they have, it's helpful for a client to learn where it's safe to rely on them and to walk in that. We do have clients who never actually leave the home until they're ready to leave and not use many of our services. We've had clients who have worked with us very discreetly for a number of months or years and then saved up until they were able to buy a house and moved out, and he never knew anything until she was gone. In the meantime, she was living with that situation. It's really just a matter of where the client is, what their comfort level is, and what they understand, because they know their situation better than anybody else. And so the client is really the lead, and everyone they have as a support is a benefit to them.
That's awesome. April, being part of a church structure, was your husband not amicable to maybe going to counseling with your pastor, or was this something you felt wouldn't have helped either way?
Not in my situation, because he wanted to be in control, and especially if it's an advice coming from me, like I think maybe you should go get some counseling, that would have been devastating for me, because I just suggested it. So it was just a ugly situation for me, and again, it was up to me to take the first step of just getting out. Nobody could do that for me but me. So no, I don't think he would have taken that advice to get counseling, or even if someone else asked him to do that. No, not with the person that he was during that time. No.
Were you the only one that felt threatened in the household, or were the children in danger as well?
My children felt threatened too, and there were times when they endured some things. I mean, that's something that I will never forget, and some of them, they had to carry that into adulthood, you know, but I'm just glad that we, like I said, we came out of that. I'm glad I'm still alive and able to be able to talk about it and to tell people, encourage people that are in that situation that, you know, they can get out. There is a way, because I felt like there was no way. I didn't feel like I could go to anyone and talk to them about it. But I thank God for hotline numbers, 800 numbers that you can call in confidence and in privacy. You don't have to, like you said about friends. Right. If you feel like you can't even go to a friend and talk to them, just try the 800 number, just to see what your options are. I would encourage anyone to do that, because there is a way. There is a way.
Thank you so much for being candid and sharing your portion of your experience with us. Another
Absolutely.
personal question. As you said, your children are possibly grown, or some of them. Do they reach out to your ex at this point to have any type of relationship with him?
Well, he's dead now.
Oh, okay.
He was actually murdered in 1993. So yeah, and then, you know, I went and jumped into another abusive relationship. So like you said, it can be like they were talking about a cycle, it being a cycle sometimes, until you just come to, and if you're able to make it out or mature from that and just see where you're going wrong at, how you're getting involved with people that abuse you, you know, it'll continue to be a cycle if you don't make some changes. So
Absolutely. Dani or Mary, have you found that a lot of the women are experiencing low self-esteem, and it takes a long time and a lot of counseling for them to come out of that and feel that they can have the power to take charge of their own lives and their families?
I will say, you know, everyone is so different in how they process trauma. Of course, yes, sometimes we do see pretty severe low self-esteem, and yes, and it definitely takes time, and whatever the way they can build their confidence, we try and work on that, because again, that's going to be different too. And so we try to figure out what's the best way to do that for them. But everybody's really all across the spectrum when it comes to that, you know. And so we really just try to meet them wherever they are in regards to that. So, yeah.
Okay. Is there a percentage of people, women that have been abused, will they eventually become abusers? Have you found that to be the case at any point?
So typically not in the sense of an intimate partner relationship type of abuse. One of the things that is common is for a woman who is living under constant abuse to become less patient and have a very difficult time at parenting, not because she doesn't love her children, but each person really has a threshold of what they're able to endure. And so it does happen sometimes where a mother who is just pushed to that brink and exhausted and emotionally exhausted, fearful all the time, will sometimes become abusive toward her children. And so we try to approach that here in just the most tactful way possible. So we always want children to be safe. At the same time, we want to recognize that that abuse toward the children is very often just a direct result of the trauma, and with the right support and the right helps and the ability and opportunity to heal in a community environment, a community of supports, that abuse can end and become very good parenting and develop into very healthy relationships between a mom and her children.
That's wonderful. Has domestic violence, and I'm losing my earpiece, give me one moment for our listening audience so I can hear. Has domestic violence or sexual abuse led any of the women seeking help to suicidal tendencies? Mary?
Sometimes. It does happen. I will say when clients are working with us, it does happen on occasion. They will recognize the need and spend some time in a residential facility. And then from there, they'll come here a little bit more prepared and able to receive further, more long-term services. It does happen. So we train our staff regularly on recognizing the signs and on understanding the questions to ask. It's important to know, okay, are you feeling this way? But also, do you have a plan? And can we safety plan with you? What is going to happen what does it look like when you reach that point where you think that you're going to make that decision and follow through with your plan? And how can we best help you to receive the support and the help that you need?
That is extraordinary. I love it. When a person comes to Samaritan House and they're broken and they're ready for a change, what is the first steps that Samaritan House leads them towards? What is the first initial intake step?
So really that first contact is generally either is with someone from the hotline or an intake worker who really just listens. And so that might be the longest conversation they have the whole time they're here. And they may or may not ever see that person again, but just being heard by somebody who recognizes what the needs are. Often clients, they don't know what they need. They don't know what options are out there. And just by listening to their story, we're able to begin to get an understanding of what services we can offer and connect them with. And then very personally, they're connected with each other department, someone who can walk them through that process. Once they've come into shelter, just resting. Oftentimes clients will just take a good 24 hours to just take it in, to just breathe, and sometimes just sleep. Many clients come and they haven't slept for days, so that they're able to think clearly. And so we do take a lot of information so we can understand fully what the client's needs are. But the first few days is really just allowing that client to just be still and just experience being safe.
Absolutely. At that point, if someone has finally made the decision that they're ready to leave and they have no possible way to get out, is Samaritan House in a position where they will go and actually pick up the woman or she and her children and take them to somewhere safe?
Oh, absolutely. So an intake is immediate. It's not planned. Unless, sometimes we will work with a client to make a plan. So he's at work from this time to this time, and here's a safe time for us to be able to come get you. Or, we've had people say, well, the only time I'm allowed to leave the house is when I take my child to physical therapy. So maybe we can arrange for that person to be picked up at that physical therapy appointment, or whatever it is that's necessary. What we don't do, we do not send our staff into the presence of the abuser. We cannot put our staff in danger of harm. You run the risk of not only the staff member being harmed, but the very person you're trying to help being extremely harmed or killed because of an escalation of anger or the recognition that the abuser is losing control. So we work with the clients to safety plan an exit strategy. We'll send a cab. We will look at different ways that client is able to leave safely, but we will always go and get them in the safest way possible.
Our listening audience, I hope that you've definitely been taking notes on this. We have 1 hot minute left, and I ask that Samaritan House please give us information where someone in need can contact you. And then I'll ask April, in her capacity as a teacher, a producer, director, if she has some information she'd like to share, contact for her too. Would Dani or Mary like to give your contact information, please?
So, of course, we want to make sure that people know our hotline. They've been showing it on the bottom, but I will just say it again, just so you can have it. Our hotline number is 757-430-2120, and there it is again. And we do have more information on our website. It's SamaritanHouseVA.org. You can go there to check out our
for
mission
those that
services.
didn't have a pen handy, that number again was 757-431-2120. And April, do you have contact information you would like to give our listening audience for yourself quickly?
Yes, you can go to www.aprilmarcell.com, or you can find me on Facebook, April Marcell, or any other social media platform, April Marcell.
Ladies, it's been a pleasure. It's been very informative. I hope that the listeners are taking heed and know that there is an avenue for them to be helped out here. Until we meet again, be a blessing to at least one other person. This has been ESP TV. Good night.